Welcome to the space between two lines. I'm Alex Saunders, and this is a space for real, honest conversations about fertility, pregnancy loss, and the journey to parenthood. Here, we hear the stories of people navigating the highs, the lows, and everything in between. A place to feel seen, understood, and less alone. Because every story matters, and so does yours. Today's episode is one of extraordinary strength, heartbreak, and resilience. Jade shares her deeply personal journey through multiple rounds of IVF and the pain of the unimaginable loss of a pregnancy following a 31-week termination for medical reasons and stillbirth at 32 weeks. Her story is raw and powerful. It's also about what it means to keep going when everything feels impossible. Now, stepping back into IVF once again, Jade opens up about hope, grief, and the courage it takes to try again. This is a conversation that will stay with you. Hi, Jade. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Did you want to start by introducing yourself to our audience and just telling us what your life looks like at the moment?
Yes, so my name's Jade. I'm 35. I live in Sydney and I am 5 weeks postpartum after a stillbirth.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah.
Did you want to take me back to when you first decided that you wanted to have a baby and you wanted to grow your family?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I was a bit of a late bloomer. My first relationship was at 27, and that's my husband today. I'd never been in love. I wasn't really interested in guys so much growing up. My family was always a bit worried, but I was just waiting for that one feeling. So I met my husband a little bit later in life and he already had children. So that was great. And we talked about our future and things like that. And I just remember meeting him and I had this feeling and I was like, wow, this is it. So we didn't plan to have children together. We were together for about 4 years before we married. And after we got engaged, we started to have that conversation. And he was like, I could do this again. And I was a bit worried because he said earlier in the relationship that it wasn't something he'd be open to. But he said to me, like, life's different now. He was very young when he had children. So a decision that he made right early on was he had a vasectomy after he had his 2 children. And that played a little part in our fertility journey. So our initial thing was to get a vasectomy reversal and then conceive naturally. So in between our engagement and getting married, he got that vasectomy reversal and we basically said, well, we'll start trying when we get married. So we're quite careful for a couple of months. And then after we got married, then we started trying. But unfortunately, the vasectomy reversal was unsuccessful. So IVF was our only option to conceive.
Okay. So can that impact your fertility? Well, obviously it has here, but there's no guarantee that you can reverse a vasectomy. So if it is reversed successfully, can that impact your fertility or is it kind of you just wait and see sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. So the data is, it depends on how long you have had it. He had it for 10 years and also the age of himself. So these all impact in a nutshell. So 10 years and then being that little bit older, so mid-30s at the time, that also impacted. And this doesn't always happen to everyone, but we were left with unsuccessful sperm count 0. Sometimes you get a lower sperm count and you still have a bit of an option. But for us, it was a 0.
Okay, so if it's a 0, what does that look like from there? So you've mentioned that IVF was your only option. Can you tell us about that process, even from going and seeing a fertility specialist, what information you got and what that was going to look like for you guys?
Yeah. So we were told IVF's your only option. So I started looking at clinics. I'm looking for values that aligned with myself more so. And we had an interview with a couple of doctors and went with the one that I felt most aligned with. It was essentially just all the blood tests for myself and my husband because he would also need to do a procedure and have the sperm removed. And then we started from there. So I think it does look quite similar other than the male would also undergo the procedure.
Yeah, and does he go under for that? Sorry, I'm just really interested because I haven't heard this side of things. Would he go under similar to you having an egg retrieval?
Yeah, same day and everything. So it was kind of cool. We went to hospital the same day. He went and had his done. His was a little bit quicker because it's essentially a needle, and then had the sperm extracted. Great result from him. I went in for my egg retrieval, and then they're combined scientifically. Yeah.
Wow, that is great. That is still an option, being
Yes.
able to do that from the male side of things as well, because I hadn't heard of that before. So, yeah, that's really good to know. Okay, so once you've had those procedures done, what happened next from there?
Yeah, look, I thought IVF, not a problem. Obviously, never tried to conceive, wasn't aware of any infertility issues, just thought, of course, it's going to work for us. But then again, you're told statistically, given our ages going in, there was only a 33% chance. Okay. But that hadn't really sunk in for me. I was like, we're going to do IVF and we're going to be pregnant. So we went in. I had 12 eggs retrieved, which is a pretty good result. Something I knew nothing about, how many eggs, quality of eggs, etc., etc. So, well, the doctor was pretty happy with that, so that convened onto me. However, after the 5 days that the sperm and the egg are put together, only one of our embryos lasted. So that kind of turned my world upside down. I was also very sick from IVF. So even though we had the one embryo rather, a fresh transfer wasn't an option. My hormones needed to settle down a bit and I become quite physically ill.
Yeah.
So that flipped our world upside down because I guess I had this expectation, I'm going to do IVF and I'm going to fall pregnant. But that didn't happen. So we waited a year to actually implant that embryo.
Okay. Why did you wait a year? Was that from advice or?
No, it was a mental thing for me. I wasn't ready. I was flipped upside down. I was grieving the process in a way. I was like, wow. In that year, I worked on myself. I worked on my mind. I worked on my body. I worked very closely with a naturopath, a Chinese herbal medicine doctor. I got regular acupuncture. I changed what I was eating. I changed the way I was moving my body. I really took on the word fertility and I become as fertile as I could be.
Yeah.
Which is something I didn't do previously. Yeah.
So then when the time was right for you to do your frozen embryo transfer, what did that look like?
So it looked like a procedure, a small medical room. The doctor comes in and he implants the embryo. And then I think the hardest part for me personally of IVF is the waiting. So you're aware that you have this embryo inside you. And of course, you want nothing more than to be pregnant. And then you have to wait. It was 11 days with my clinic. I know they do vary from clinics, but it's the longest 11 days of your life. So wait 11 days, find out if you're pregnant, and then go from there.
Yeah. Did you do a pregnancy test or did you wait to get those results?
Yes, no, I definitely couldn't wait. I'm one of those people. And we did a pregnancy test and it was negative. So spiral down. And then I think that was probably day 9. I just couldn't wait the 11 days. Day 9 negative. Day 11 it was negative.
Okay. So you were kind of prepared going into that test that it might be negative having that blood.
Yes, I
Yeah.
was.
Okay. How did you process that after all the work you'd done in the lead up and obviously you'd already sort of grieved the process? How did you process that in that moment?
Yeah, with a lot of tears, with a lot of sadness. Really, I just tried to open up and communicate to my husband because I didn't want it to come between us. But there was certainly a lot, it was grief, a form of grief, because we'd lost the hope of having a child and also grieving the fact that I needed to do IVF again. That was a big thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And having to put your body through that whole process again is, yeah, quite confronting and overwhelming.
Yeah, 100%, particularly with the type of response that I did have from the medications. I knew that if I did have to do IVF again, we'd need to change things, which we did for our second round. But it was certainly like a trial run for us, if you will.
Yeah. Did you hyperstimulate? Like, what was the cause of you becoming so ill?
Yeah, I think for me, dosages were too high. I said all my results on paper, the doctor did the drugs accordingly, but the way I reacted to the drugs was a little bit more than what they expected.
Yeah. Okay. And how long was your recovery after that first collection?
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
That's
was a
awful.
lot.
Just physically on your body. Yeah.
Yeah, the physical factor for me in that first round was the most because my body just didn't know what to do with all of these hormones essentially and reacted very sensitively. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, it makes complete sense that you waited to do that transfer and then you were feeling very, overwhelmed having to do that process all over again. Did you want to talk me through what the next collection looked like for you and what they changed and if that worked?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I remember a couple of months after having that negative result, I was thinking, when am I ever going to feel ready to do IVF again? And my husband and I were on a walk, and I remember saying, I don't think I'll ever feel ready. Should we go and do it? And he's like, yes, let's do it. So we did. Our doctor changed our medication altogether, and she also put me on about half dose, which we knew the outcome of that would mean a lower expectations for how many eggs were retrieved. And I thought, no problem. Like, we only need one, right? Just do what I can to get less side effects. So we did. So we went through IVF. Again, we changed a lot of things. So I was injecting myself for the first round, where I got my husband to inject me, and that was a better outcome for me. Just not as severe. I ended up with less bruises on my tummy and things like that. And then after the second egg retrieval, we were really high spirits, really happy. Tried to make the best out of IVF, essentially the whole journey. We collected 9 eggs, and at day 5, we ended up with 2 embryos. So we're happy with that. That was a double result than last time. And I didn't have that physical tiredness and exhaustion that I ended up with the first time. So we were quite happy with that second round. And I was able to do a fresh transfer, which again was another really positive sign for us. My body's okay. We can go in for a fresh transfer.
Yep. Obviously, that was off the back of your egg collection. But the first time around when you did the frozen embryo transfer, was that just in sync with your natural cycle, or were you taking drugs in the lead up to
Yeah,
that? Do you remember?
great question. Yeah, always my natural cycle. I'm one of those ladies who gets the period on the dot every month and ovulates. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then did you want to talk me through the fresh transfer and what happened after that?
Yeah, I would love to. So fresh transfer, we went in again, same procedure room, same doctor, we implanted, and then that was that 11-day wait. Again, I couldn't wait, so I did like the at-home pregnancy test probably on day 7, and it was negative. So I was preparing myself for that again. And then we did the day 11 blood test, and it was positive.
Oh, wow.
And I still remember the day that I found out. I was in tears, obviously very happy tears, but just unbelievable. It was a moment in my life that I'll never forget, being pregnant on a test for the very first time after all of this, all the lead up, the IVF, everything. So I was very excited, and I couldn't wait to tell everyone. Again, this was the first time that I'd ever been pregnant. And with my clinic during IVF, you get another test a week later and then another week later. So the week later, fine, we're pregnant. And then the 2-week test, we weren't pregnant. My HCG had gone right down. So we had essentially they called it a chemical pregnancy.
Yeah. Okay. How did you process that? And were you expecting, because this was your first pregnancy, was there any worry in your mind, or were you kind of like, we've got there, great, we're pregnant now, this is it? Did you have any stress around that, or were you just sort of in this blissful state thinking that it was all going to be fine?
Blissful state, it never even crossed my mind of a miscarriage or baby loss. Never. You're not something I even thought about for a split second. Yeah.
That would have been so hard to process and such a shock after everything you'd been through. At that point, did you almost have to wait to have a miscarriage, or were you given some options?
Yeah, no, at that point, it all happened naturally. Essentially, a couple of days later, it was as if I had my period, and that was the miscarriage. So it just came out naturally.
Yeah. How'd you move through those following weeks?
A lot of crying, a lot of connecting with my husband. Again, we really gelled together and went through this together. I was super, super sad. It was a very hard loss for me. I made sure I got counseling. I spoke to my counselors. I could feel that I needed to deal with that. Otherwise, it was going to affect me.
Yeah. And what were your thoughts around moving forward and trying again at that point? You've said you obviously wanted to have some counseling and things like that. Did you want to give it a break, or did you kind of want to move through and keep going at that point?
Yeah, I was quite eager. Like, the pregnancy sparked something in me. It gave me the motivation that I needed. And the following month, we did our next implantation. So essentially, as soon as I could with my cycle.
Yeah. Okay. And what did that look like?
That looked like the same process, the embryo transfer, and then that waiting game. This time, essentially I was a bit shaken up. I didn't do the test and I was very hesitant to answer the phone on the day 11 after taking my blood test, scared to know the results, knowing that it might not be what we wanted.
Yeah. And what was the result of that?
The result of this one was again pregnant, extremely pregnant, like a very high HCG level. They were quite astounded. And of course, I was happy and I was excited. But there was a part of me that was also, are you sure? What if? Did you get my blood test mixed? Are you sure? Double sure? I didn't quite absorb it, although I was happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you move through those early weeks having to show up for that next blood test? Like, how did that feel and how did you kind of get through that really initial
Yeah.
stage?
I pushed myself. I thought of the end results, but I was still very on edge and in disbelief. And I really didn't accept it. I kept getting these positive results, but I was on edge. I was really weary because of, the loss there. But I remember saying to my husband, we'll wait till 12 weeks and we'll tell people. And still at 12 weeks, I was still wary. I think it was the 13th week mark where I'm like, I really need to let this go. I need to accept this pregnancy and I want to tell people.
Yeah. Okay. So, did you want to just talk me through your pregnancy? Obviously, that we're at the 13-week scan. Were things looking good? Were you able to lean in, or did you still have that fear associated with that original loss?
Okay. Yeah, great. So once going through IVF, you get scans from quite early. So it was 6, 8, and then a 12-week. And every time that would really reinstate I'm pregnant because again, I still couldn't believe it. It was quite hard to believe. But I think it was 12 and a half weeks by the time I had my 12-week scan. And I actually started to tell myself this is happening and I can accept this. I'm worthy of this. This is happening. And then thinking about having that baby, that's what got me through.
Yeah. And then did you want to just talk me through the rest of that time and what happened next?
Yeah. So we did all the routine scans. So the next was a 20-week scan. So we did that and we had a little bit of a scare. We were told there were a few complications and that we needed to go to the maternal fetal medicine department of our local hospital to get an overview. So, we were shook up and that took probably 5 days to get an appointment there. So we were thinking worst case scenario. I just remember crying on the way to work every single morning thinking that there's going to be an issue with our baby. And then we went to the MFM clinic and they scanned me for about 2 hours and they said that they got it wrong. There was nothing there. Everything was looking okay, which was a huge relief for us.
Did you need to do any follow-ups after that, or was it because they'd said that there was nothing wrong, you could just continue sort of a low-risk pregnancy?
Yeah, no, speaking, I was low risk the entire time, but no, they said it was a sonographer and a professor who actually looked over the scan and looked at the results, and they both cleared and said that no, the results that you received from your 20-week scan are incorrect. And these are the findings. You've just got a healthy baby and not to worry, essentially. Yeah.
Okay. Did you find that easy to accept?
I was relieved. A little, I think 10% of me was a little bit on edge, but just being told that, I just trusted. And we went on with the pregnancy as normal and waited until our 28-week scan.
Yeah. Okay. And how did that 28-week scan go?
Yeah, so because we had a scare at 20 weeks, if you will, we were recommended that we go to a particular clinic that had really clear communication with our hospital. So we did that. It was probably 28 and a half weeks by the time I got the appointment. And we went in and again, we were faced with these results of a complicated pregnancy. And again, I remember thinking just to get through it, it's going to be the same result as last time. It's just the way that he's laying because he was moving a lot and often he wasn't the right way up and things like that, which made it difficult for the sonographer. But I just held on hope that this was another mistake and we'd be told it was all clear, particularly given I was almost 29 weeks at this stage. So we booked in with the NHM clinic again. And then we were faced with the news that you can't even imagine. Essentially, our results and our consistencies were there. They were presented and they found them again. And we were presented with more testing options at this stage to get a clear view, because during the scan, they just go off measurements and they make speculations of what that might mean. So, yeah, we were faced with the worst possible news.
Yeah. At that point, were they telling you what they thought was wrong with the baby? Like, did you hear that in that initial 20-week scan and then they said the same thing again? Will you give it information or?
Like, when you get the information, they tend to give you like these big words that you've never heard of, and then they go and say something wrong with the brain. So that's essentially all we knew. And that presented again, essentially, in that second scan. So they wanted to move forward with an MRI just to get a really clear picture of his little brain and then make a diagnosis with that.
Yeah. And you went ahead with the MRI?
Yeah, we went ahead with the MRI.
Yeah. And then did you get a formal diagnosis from there?
Yeah, so there were multiple things, but essentially we had some issues with his brain development and a little tumor and sac of fluid on the brain. Yeah.
Were you then presented with some options?
Yeah, we were. We were essentially told what life would look like going ahead with this, risks of in the early days of his life, risks during the birth. Yeah, well, pretty much given this is what life would look like. You get this support throughout your life for this child. And this is how it would affect you as the mum, essentially, with the delivery and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you guys process that? And did you take some time to think about what you were going to do?
Yeah. I guess in hindsight, because we had that scare at 20 weeks, we had discussed what ifs. We had discussed worst case scenarios. My husband and I weren't 100% in agreement at the 20-week mark, but we just respected each other's choice. And because we didn't need to make that decision, it didn't move forward. But I think, by this stage, I was 30 weeks and we were faced with this decision, and we opened up the conversations that we had at 20 weeks. And I did feel a little bit differently, imagining life with our son, imagining him within our family unit and all of the extra support that he would have needed. So we left the hospital, we went home that evening, and I woke up the very next day and thought, we need to start this process. We need to start it. So that's what we did. We returned to the hospital the very next day.
Yeah. Would have been such a hard decision to make. If you're comfortable doing so, did you want to talk me through what that process looked like for you guys? And
yeah. So that process for us looked like, because the pregnancy had progressed to the stage, we needed essentially approval to terminate the pregnancy, which was a board of directors taking our case, discussing it and signing off on it. So that was the very first step, saying, yes, can we please start that? We had to have a psych review. So essentially we got asked a whole lot of questions from a psychologist into why we were making the decision, if we felt like we were influenced and things like that. And then a couple of days later, my midwife called me and said that the review board has accepted the decision, and then we need to book in the procedure.
yeah. Was that hard? Even though you had made that decision, was it still hard receiving that information, kind of accepting that this is what's going to actually happen now?
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult, of course, but looking back on it now, you're just in survival mode. And I was more thinking about, how am I going to get through this birth? I need to get through this birth. I need my husband and myself to be okay. So I was really pouring all of my energy into that and getting through however I needed to. Yeah.
Yeah. And do they give you options of what your birth can look like, or what you like, how you want to do it?
No, they're not. Essentially, they go for the safest option. I thought a C-section might have been an option, but they said no, it's safer to vaginally birth. So we went with that. That was what I wanted, but I can understand emotionally why some women would want the C-section. But yeah, so we birthed vaginally.
Yeah. So you went into hospital and you birthed your baby boy.
Yeah.
How did you spend some time at hospital before you went home? What did that look like? Does your baby boy have a name as well? love to hear it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
named him Hugo a couple of weeks before we went in. It was the only name we could agree on, but happy with that. So I was induced. Essentially, what happened, we went in for the procedure to end Hugo's life. And then they gave me a tablet that day to actually soften my cervix. And then the whole idea was to return to hospital in 2 days to be inducted. So that's what we did. We went home and then admitted ourselves to hospital in 2 days to be inducted for birth.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't comprehend going through something like that. It would have been really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. After you went through that, what did the weeks look like from there, and how did you kind of move through that grief and pain?
Very numb. It was survival, doing the small things, getting in the shower, eating your dinner, brushing your hair. Even 5 months later, some of those tasks are still really difficult because the heaviness of the grief affects you in every single way. I feel like I've had a lot of loss in my life, but losing your child, yeah, it is significant. I'm still working very closely with a psychologist and I have a lot of support around me, but that thick fog that has come from this grief, it's really debilitating.
I can imagine. So this was 5 months ago?
5 months ago,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about the experience of the birth? Only if you're comfortable doing so.
No, I'd love to. I mean, birth was something I became very passionate about when I fell pregnant. And I was one of those people reading the books, doing the courses. I was really intrigued and I wanted to have a great birth. So our birth was actually, despite the grief, I was able to close that off and completely open up and have a really empowering physiological birth. They, of course, talked me through all of the options, pain relief and things like that. And I was open to it a little bit more because I knew that I was embodied by grief and it would be a little bit different. But I was able to get through the birth and not need any of that and just birth, just do what my body was designed to do naturally. Yeah.
And did you get to spend some time with Hugo before you said goodbye?
Yeah, the hospital were amazing in that regard. Like they moved me directly from the maternity ward onto another ward because a crying baby is a huge trigger for me. So they were very respectful of that and essentially said, you stay as long as you want, which was really lovely. We chose to stay 2 nights and then, yeah, we left.
Yeah. God, I can't imagine. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And I mean, you've spoken about that you obviously are working through psychological support at the moment. In those early weeks as well, how did you manage those postpartum symptoms? Because obviously your body doesn't know that, you've lost your baby. How was it coping with that?
Yeah, another beautiful question and often not spoken about. So, of course, my baby birthed and my body didn't know that that baby wasn't breathing. So, I had breast milk and I didn't know what to do with it. Again, my first pregnancy, my first birth, I didn't know whether I was even going to produce breast milk. So, they spoke to me about it at the hospital because my breasts were quite sore. And they said, we can give you a medication to stop the milk or you can express and you can donate the milk. So I made the decision in honor of Hugo to express and I did that for 2 months and I packaged up all the milk and donated it.
What an amazing thing to do, Jade. That is just such a beautiful thing. You could I can't imagine having to do that. It would have been really hard. So you're amazing.
Yeah, but it was definitely difficult.
Yeah.
But very healing. Like for me, that was Hugo's milk. And for somebody else to get benefit for that because he couldn't, really, really healing.
Yeah. And where did you donate it? Just for anyone that might be listening that is thinking about donating milk, it would be good to know where you can actually donate it. And
100%. So I just contacted my doula and she kind of dispersed it for me. But there is an organization I know that maybe I think it's Red Cross that you can donate and they will send it to the neonatal units of the ward. So they could certainly support you with that. Because I initially started that process and then I ended up going through my doula.
yeah, okay. And I might do a bit of research and put some things in the show notes just for anyone that might be helpful link for them. So what does life look like for you at the moment now?
Yeah. Life looks like learning how to cope without our boy.
Yeah.
It looks like a lot of support, particularly from my husband. And I've got support networks through Red Nose and Bears of Hope and obviously my family. And it looks like what's next in terms of conception. This has definitely fueled us to keep going. And we are looking at IVF for the future.
Yeah. How does that feel, like knowing that you will have to go through that process again? Is that hard at the moment to think about?
Yeah, very hard, but I got a lot of grit in me because it was a beautiful experience to get that far in my pregnancy, to be able to birth my boy, and just knowing that one day I'll have a real life baby, that lives and I can be that mother. It's definitely stimulation to go on our next path.
Yeah. This might be a difficult question to answer, but have you questioned when you did initially go at that 20-week mark and they said that there was nothing wrong? Have you raised any questions around it? Why? Like, should it have been picked up at that point? Or was it just that they couldn't see it yet?
It certainly should have, and it has crossed my mind, but I feel for me, I couldn't go there. Like, I can't pass the blame.
Yeah.
I've just got to really stay in my lane. I've got to get through this, and I can't point the finger, but I've certainly thought about it. But this is our path.
Yeah.
And I am a true believer in everything that happens to us is a lesson and it just makes you better on the other side. I still can't see that with Hugo, but I have certainly learnt lessons throughout our whole conception journey, because it has been 3.5 years now, of the things that I've learned and the person I've become because of those lessons.
Yeah. Even to be able to sit here and speak like this and not throw blame and, be able to talk about it is just amazing. So you should be so proud of yourself. You're so resilient. And obviously, you've done a lot of work to get here. So, yeah, be super proud of yourself. What have you done to honor Hugo? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, we have a little shrine in our home. It's got a beautiful little photo of Hugo, a candle. I've got his little scrapbook that my midwife made for me in hospital. I've got a little blanket that was made for him and a little photograph of the placenta above it.
Yeah.
So that's our little piece of him. I think about him every day. I talk about him openly, using his name. That's how we honor him in our family.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any tools that have been super helpful for you just moving through your grief throughout the last 5 months or even prior to that?
Yeah, I think the pivotal moment and the moment that got me talking openly is connecting with peers who have been through the same thing, because I didn't have that. I felt alone. I felt like I was the only woman who had ever lost her baby before I reached out to Red Nose and Bears of Hope. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, but exactly what I needed. And now I speak really freely about Hugo's loss.
Yeah. We'll also put those links in the show notes as well for anyone listening.
Yeah.
And just finally, is there anything else that you wanted to share or any advice you wanted to give to someone maybe who might be having to make that really tough decision? We might start there and then.
Yeah. Wow. For that tough decision, I think you have to be really true to you. Nobody else at the end of the day is going to take home your baby, and it is a lifelong decision. I think it's really important not to be influenced and not to have other people's opinions interfere with your decision. And I know for me, there's little glimpses of guilt and shame and things like that, but that's things that you can work through a really good therapist with and overcome that, because at the end of the day, that decision is very powerful and it's your decision to make.
Yeah, for sure. And then just any advice for someone who might be starting to move through that grief, might have just gone through something, really awful. Do you have any advice for them or any messages you wanted to share?
I want to give you a hug. There are so many supportive organizations out there that I have tapped into, just to look, to know that there's support and to know that an element of kindness in the world was presented to us when we lost our son. I'd never been confronted with so much kindness. People were so kind. People were so understanding. It was so beautiful. So just to keep moving on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. And I'm so sorry for what you've been through. And I'll be thinking of you and really hoping that, whatever comes in the future is positive for you. And you get your little baby, your second baby. But thank you so much for sharing. And is there anything else that you wanted to share today? Or
No, I feel really good, and thank you for the questions and for believing in me and bringing me on. I really appreciate it.
no, yes, this is going to be so helpful for so many people because, again, some of those questions aren't really spoken about, are they? And it's a really challenging thing to talk about. So having the courage to come on here today is remarkable. Be so proud of yourself.
Thank you. And that's why I did it. I want people to feel connected and not feel the shame and be able to talk about it. So thank you.
100%. This has been The Space Between Two Lines. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and register on our website to share your story. The link is in the bio. Until next time.